The story begins with a powerful weapon hitting the protagonist's body, leaving him hanging on a long pole. The protagonist, with a hole in his chest and a weapon stuck in him, cleared his throat. He calmly raised his head and said that it was time to begin. A monster with many arms holding weapons in them and hovering in the air looked at the protagonist with a huge eye in her hands. She quickly directed her long leg forward. The protagonist tensed up, after which powerful explosions thundered through the buildings, rapidly raising streams of smoke. The S-rank Esper that humanity had been waiting for so long was dead. Endless despair and fear continued to grip the hearts of people. This is the end. The author thanked all the readers for their support. The fact that they were able to read up to this point is the best decision in their lives. The protagonist, lying on his bed, looked at his phone. He sighed with a serious look and said that this was another bad ending. The main character was the one and surprisingly the only fan of this novel, so he expected at least gratitude from the author. He got out of bed and went to do some important business, when suddenly his phone instantly lit up, sending a message. The worlds merge and a new chapter begins. The next day, tall buildings stand under the rays of the sun. Chang Ting walked forward with a serious look, his hands in his pockets. Seeing the gathered crowd, he thought that they were saying that now it is impossible to buy a new building. It looks like another scam organization. Suddenly, he looked up and began to look around, asking, "Where is the building?" After all, it was just here. Chang Ting walked between the people with interest, pushing them aside and asking for forgiveness, telling them to let him go. He looked at the empty space where the building should have stood and wondered what the hell is this. The people around thought that they were deceived. These damned companies are incompetent in building buildings, but they are real champions in demolition. All their investments simply disappeared and they were left in suckers. Chang Ting walked forward looking at the people and thought that they had demolished an entire building overnight. Was the level of construction in their time so high? Some time later, at the first national school, the protagonist opened the door to the office and a terrifying monster immediately flew out at him. In fact, it was his friend Lien Qingyu, who happily jumped on him with his hand over the protagonist's shoulder. He turned to Chang Ting with a serious look and loudly said that the end of the world was approaching. The protagonist calmly poked his finger at his cheek and asked if he had really been playing games all night again. Qingyu swore that he was telling the truth. Let him just look at these posts. The messages said that the apartments they bought from Danda corporations disappeared in just one night. They worked like slaves and spent their hard-earned money on it. Qingyu asked with a satisfied look, "Now does he understand?" All over the world, entire real estate complexes are disappearing overnight. Does he really think this is a coincidence? Chang Ting scratched his head and said, "It must really be a coincidence." Qingyu asked with a sly grin on his face if the protagonist didn't think the current situation was very similar to the omen of the monster attack in the novel. Chang Ting looked ahead with a surprised expression and wondered, could this really be a monster attack? The protagonist with a drop of sweat on his face said, "That's impossible." He immediately took out his phone and found that the novel had been deleted. Qingyu wasn't even surprised that the end of the world was almost here, and his friend was still thinking about reading the novel. Chang Ting wondered with a puzzled look, could it really have been deleted? The beginning of the novel tells of mysterious events involving the disappearance of a large number of unfinished buildings. The protagonist of the novel is a man. When he came to school, that same childhood friend told him that the end of the world was coming soon. All this could no longer be explained by a simple coincidence. But could something like this really happen? Will the novel become reality? The protagonist, looking tense, quickly ran out of the office and shouted to his friend that he remembered important things to do. Let him tell the teacher that he had a stomach ache. Qingyu even cried because his boy had grown up and started skipping school. He would make excuses for him in front of the teacher. After some time, the protagonist ran quickly down the street and thought that according to the description of the novel, these disappeared unfinished buildings would leave behind foundations. These foundations would become portals for attacking monsters from another world. If the description of the novel really becomes reality, then the first portal should appear in this city. Chang Ting ran to the right place and looking at the mark on the ground, he thought that this really was the first teleportation circle. A curious old man extended his hand towards him and asked if this damned company had deceived him too. He is still young, so he should not be upset. Chang Ting ignored the old man and tried to catch his breath. According to the description in the novel, this teleportation is called the Abyss, but the narrative did not provide any information about how exactly they appear. 999 teleportation circles connected to the Abyss suddenly appeared across the nation. monsters will appear from the abyss at midnight tonight. They can take on many different shapes and forms. The higher the abyss number is, the greater the level of terror. They can withstand monsters from level 1 to level 10 with their current weapons. However, starting from level 11, no weapon can harm them. However, there are 2 ways to harm them. The first way is that after killing the monster, they can receive rewards from the mystic world. These rewards include special combat weapons and abilities that can make a person stronger. Only with these rewards will humanity be able to stand against these creatures. According to the plot of the novel, the first abyss monster to appear in the story is a creature that resembles a large dog. This monster attacks with teeth and claws, but moves slowly. It is quite easy to kill. Chang Ting thought with a tense expression that if this is the case, then maybe he can try to get the first kill reward. According to the description of the book, the first person to kill the abyss monster gets the first kill reward. If the protagonist remembers correctly, the first kill reward gives a physique-boosting skill. He will even be able to defeat the second-level monster with the robust physique that skill gives when others have to form teams to fight them. He clutched his bag in his hand and thought that he did not know how all this happened. But still, since he cannot avoid it, he can only do his best to become stronger. He shouted this, forgetting that he was not alone, and the people around him thought he was a goofy kid. Sometime later at school, Chang Ting turned to the boss and said that he needed this. The woman sitting at the table gave him the pipes. He thought that the best way to deal with the first level abyss seeds was a spear-type weapon. He just needed to gather these steel pipes and attach a knife to them. After a while, Chang Ting walked forward along the busy street with a bag of pipes in his hands and thought about these iron sheets. He could wrap them around his body for protection, creating armor. The student turned towards him and asked, "Is he skipping classes?" She quickly picked up the phone in her hand. Her father, with an angry look, loudly asked into the phone, "When will she come home? He has something important to tell her." The student, with a puzzled look, moved her hand holding the phone to the side. After that, she put the phone to her ear and loudly said into the receiver that she would be home soon. After some time, the protagonist is sitting on the floor of the room with things scattered around. He put his hand on the armor on his chest with a serious look and said that it is better to have something than nothing. Now all he has to do is collect his weapons. Chang Ting put his hand on the pipe mouth with a knife with a determined look and said that he feels irritated. The protagonist hopes that everything will go well. At 11:40 at night near the first portal, Chang Ting, holding a homemade weapon in his hand, said that there is no one nearby. He walked forward and said that he still has 20 minutes. The protagonist must get the first kill. Chang Ting sighed and looked at the phone in his hand, which said it was 23 hours 59 minutes and 55 seconds. He confidently got into a fighting stance, pointing his weapon forward, and began counting down the last seconds. Dark tendrils quickly crawled out from under the ground around him, illuminating the space around him with red light. A magic circle quickly appeared in place of the portal, from which a beam of mana instantly struck the sky. A stream of mana shrouded in dark tendrils rose up, blowing the air. Many beams of mana rose into the sky among the buildings in the city. Chang Ting, with a terrifying look, clenched his teeth, quickly looked forward. A wolf with spikes on its back and a yellow aura in its eyes looked at the protagonist. Chang Ting, holding a weapon in his hands, thought that this was an abyss seed. First-level seeds usually attack with swift lunges. If you dodge at the moment of lunge, you can pierce its lower back. He looked at the monster heading towards him with a determined look and thought that he needed to be calm and remember to control his emotions. The protagonist, looking forward with anger, thought that he would take advantage of the moment, make one hit and get one kill. The wolf, with an ominous look, opened its mouth and quickly jumped forward with the intention of attacking. Chang Ting, looking forward with confidence, thought that he needed to do it now. He instantly jumped aside from the monster's attack. The protagonist waved his weapon with anger on his face and loudly said for him to die. Chang Ting quickly pierced the monster's body with a knife blade, releasing dark streams from it. He stepped aside, looked at the wolf and loudly said that he did it. The protagonist, looking at the lying bloody body of the monster, asked if he was really dead. Chang Ting said with surprise that something was wrong here. After the death of the abyss seed, it should drop the abyss stones. He did not receive a request for the first kill and did not see any abyss stones. The protagonist looked forward with a smile on his face. He sat down on the ground near the monster's body and said that he was cunning. Unfortunately, the wolf will not be able to pretend to be dead. Chang Ting will calmly wait for his death. The wolf, with an angry look, stood up shaking and looked at him. The monster raised its head and disappeared into thin air. The system window notifies that it congratulates him. The protagonist's code is 1. He successfully made the first kill of the Abyss Seed, earning the title of Lonely Soul. Chang Ting clenched his fists with a joyful look and said loudly that he succeeded. The protagonist looked at the system window with a grin on his face, notifying him that he wanted to activate the title. He loudly agreed to it. A terrifying mana wolf quickly enveloped his neck. His body rose into the air, and the wolf's shadow quickly appeared behind him. The protagonist raised his hands, enveloped in mana rays and dark streams, and shouted loudly. Mana of different colors quickly enveloped his body into a ball. Chang Ting clenched his fists and looked forward from the opening rays. The system window notifies that the Lonely Soul has been activated. The first effect, enhancing physique, is 10 times greater than the maximum human strength and 10 times greater than hardness. The second effect, enhancing neuroresponse ability. It is twice the limit of human reaction ability. The protagonist, shrouded in smoke, asked, "Is it really over?" He looked at the palm of his hand clenched into a fist with a smile on his face, and said that this is truly a worthy reward for the first kill. Next, Chang Ting will test how far the improvement of the physique can go. He quickly got into a fighting stance and hit the ground with his hand, leaving a dent in it. The protagonist, with a smile on his face, looked at his fist and loudly said that it was very strong. It did not hurt at all. He clenched his teeth and quickly raised his fist up with the intention of attacking. Chang Ting delivered a powerful blow, raising a huge stream of smoke. The protagonist, looking at the large trace left on the ground among the smoke, loudly said that it was very powerful and simply amazing. He, with a smile on his face, extended his hand towards the stone shrouded in mana and said that he would see what incredible abilities this stone of the abyss would give him. Chang Ting, raising his hand up, threw his head back and threw the stone into his mouth. He looked forward with an aura in his eye and asked, "Is this a spatial ability?" The system window notified that spatial abilities can even store inanimate objects. Chang Ting put his hand on his face with a tired expression and said, "Which means this is a spatial ability related to storage." This is a little less impressive than he expected. The protagonist will now check the weapon. He waved his hand and threw the sword to the side, flipping it in the air. The system window notified that this is a level 1 hunting god sword. The first effect, physical stat enhancement, is halved. The second effect, bleeding, causes the target to continuously bleed, reducing their maximum health by 1% per second. The protagonist looked forward in amazement and said loudly, "This is physical stat enhancement and bleeding percentage." He put his hand to the blade of the knife with a smile on his face and said that the physical enhancement from the title, combined with the hunting god sword, had already given him a starting position higher than everyone else. Besides, he already has plans for the upcoming events. Chang Ting, with a grin on his face, quickly extended his hand with a weapon in it and said that the second level Abyss Seed will arrive in 3 days. He is already looking forward to it very much. Sometime later at school, a student put his hand on his hip holding a phone in his hand, showed it to the other students. Qingyu, with red cheeks, quickly jumped forward and loudly called out to the protagonist. He hit his body hard on the floor of the classroom. Qingyu knelt down, looked to the side and asked why it seemed to him that Chang Ting had changed a little. The protagonist with a grin on his face looked forward, put his hands in his pockets and laughed. Qingyu raised his hands to the side and asked if he knew that the end of the world was really approaching. Yesterday evening, many people saw the appearance of monsters. He seriously raised his phone, showing its screen to the protagonist, and loudly said that this was not only in their country, but also abroad. Someone even posted a photo of the monster on the overseas internet, but unfortunately, it was later deleted. Fortunately, Qingyu saved one. In the photo, a special forces soldier with a smile on his face threw a wolf over his shoulder. Qingyu, with a smile on his face, pointed his finger at the phone screen and loudly said for Chang Ting to look at it. This guy is a retired special forces soldier from abroad. According to him, this monster appeared out of nowhere, from the foundation of an unfinished building. Qingyu angrily looked forward and asked what happened after the special forces soldier killed the monster. The protagonist asked with an interested look, "What happened?" A friend put his hands on his shoulders and loudly said that he had received a mysterious reward. Does Chang Ting understand that these are superpowers? The special forces soldier gained control over lightning. Qingyu believes that he is wrong. The friend with a serious look said loudly that this is a good job for them. Although they missed the first chance, but according to his analysis, the monsters will definitely appear again. Next time, they will unite and try to get superpowers. Chang Ting calmly raised his hand, walked to the side and loudly agreed with him. After a while, the teacher adjusted her glasses with her hand and turned to the children. She said that this concerns the information that appeared on the internet today. The teacher hopes that everyone will restrain themselves and will not believe or spread this information. They should also refrain from repeating discussions. For them, studying is the most important thing now. The protagonist calmly leaned his face on his hand, looked to the side and said that in 3 days they will no longer think the same way. Qingyu, with an offended look, put his hands on the notebook, looked to the side and said that Chang Ting, he. The bell rang quickly, not letting him finish. The teacher said that the lesson was over. Today's lesson was very important. This is a topic that needs to be studied. She hopes that everyone will take this seriously, and if they have questions, they can ask the teacher at any time. The protagonist looked away and sighed heavily and said that the lesson was finally over. Qingyu, with an ominous look, stood by Chang Ting's desk and asked him to go with him and said that he wanted to ask for something. The protagonist calmly put his hand on the back of his head. Some time later, on the school football field, Qingyu, putting his hands behind his back, asked if the protagonist was hiding something from him. Chang Tang, scratching the back of his head with his hand, said that he didn't even know it. The friend, with tears in his eyes, jumped up, raising his hands and loudly said that from today on, they were no longer friends. The protagonist, stretching out his hand towards him, loudly told him not to joke like that. Qingyu, with a pitiful look, turned around and said that he thought that they were like brothers to each other, but it turned out like this. Chang Ting put his hands on his hips and said loudly that he wanted to tell him later. The friend must promise him that he will not tell anyone else about this. Qingyu, with a serious look, hit his chest with his fist and said loudly that he will not tell anyone about this. The protagonist put his foot on the ladder, extended his hand forward and looked at his friend and told him to watch. Chang Ting hit his finger on the ladder and broke off a piece of it, throwing it aside. Qingyu, with amazement on his face, quickly looked forward, raised his hand and loudly said that this is amazing. The protagonist, with a grin on his face, raised his hands to the sides and said that last night he killed a monster and received abilities. The friend grabbed his hand with admiration and looking at it said that this is very unusual. The student turned her head and looked at them. She said with shame, which means that friendship between guys can also be very close. Chang Ting, with a confident look, showed 3 fingers on his hand and said that in 3 days a new monster will appear. The protagonist already knows where it will appear. When the time comes, he will help his friend kill it, and Qingyu will also be able to obtain abilities. The friend, looking ahead with a puzzled expression, asked where he got such information. Chang Ting, with a smile on his face, said loudly that the less he knew, the less he would worry. After a while, cars drove along the road under a clear sky. The protagonist, with a serious look, walked down the street, put his hands in his pockets and thought that the second abyss would appear in an abandoned factory. It is about 30 kilometers from here. Unlike the first abyss, the second will have 2 abyss seeds. One of them will be in the form of a monkey, very fast, using claws as weapons. However, this abyss seed has almost no defensive abilities, and its body is no different from that of an ordinary monkey. As for the second abyss seed, it resembles a silverback gorilla. Although it is slow, it has very strong defense and destructive power. Chang Ting thought with a confident grin on his face that he was much ahead of them in strength and speed. He only needed to instantly kill the first one, then disable the second one and leave the final blow to Qingyu. Aunt Wang ran towards the protagonist and called out his name loudly. He calmly said what was the matter, where was she going in such a hurry? Wang took his hand and told him to come to dinner today. Chang Ting asked with a serious look, was his uncle really here again? Aunt sighed and said that he was very smart, nothing could be hidden from the protagonist. Chang Ting knows his uncle's character. His uncle, as the protagonist knows, has always been targeting his father's property. Chang Ting is too weak to fight him, so he'd better avoid him if he can. The protagonist put his hands on her shoulders and turned to his aunt and said whatever happens, he appreciates her concern. Chang Ting can take care of herself. Wang, looking at the protagonist leaving, thought he's a good guy, but why is life so unfair to him? After some time, Chang Ting's house stands under the bright rays of the sun. Relatives are sitting on the couch drinking drinks in his house. The cousin asked with a serious look why the protagonist hasn't returned yet. He turned to uncle and asked if Chang Ting is hiding again. Uncle, smiling and with a flushed face, holding a bottle in his hand, asked why they should worry. It will be good if he doesn't come, the 2 of them can finally settle down. Uncle, raising a piece of paper in his hand, said loudly that they have the will, and therefore the house is theirs. The protagonist said loudly that he has returned. He looked at them with an angry expression, clenched his teeth, and said that not only had he broken into his house, but he had also made a mess here. Isn't he ashamed? The cousin angrily stood up from the sofa, quickly looked forward, and loudly told Chang-Ting not to talk like that. The uncle put his hand in front of his son and called out to him. He turned to the main character with a smirk on his face and said that he had been living in this house for quite a long time. The uncle, as the eldest, had already done everything he could. He put his hand on his shoulder with a sly look and said that now Chang-Ting was an adult, and it was time for him to start doing something. This is what the uncle offered him: to quickly pack his things, go outside, rent a house, and time still passed. He handed him the money with a smile on his face, waving it in different directions, and told the main character to take it and consider it a small gift from his uncle. Chang-Ting should accept it without objection. Cousin asked loudly and angrily, what is he doing standing there without moving? He needs to hurry up and pack his things and leave his house. Chang-Ting said angrily, using his fake will to do whatever he wants. He and uncle are really bad. Uncle asked loudly and angrily, looking forward quickly. Chang-Ting said, does he have any evidence? If the protagonist is able to, he can go to court. With his many years of connections with people, uncle does not believe that Chang-Ting can win. The protagonist asked angrily, standing in front of them, when the old man was seriously ill in the hospital, who took care of him every day? Wasn't it his mother? When he needed medical care, his mother worked 4 jobs, and he worked 3. What about the 2 of them? He said seriously, one of them drinks a lot, and the other gambles, investing neither money nor effort. They regularly come to their house to steal money. It's just a shame on their family. Uncle, with a smile on his face, arms crossed, asked, what's the point of this conversation? The will is in their hands, this house belongs to them. He says again that Chang-Ting should either sue him or leave quietly. Cousin, standing at the table, raised his hand and said that the protagonist speaks so confidently. In his opinion, Chang-Ting's mother died fairly, all because of this house. His family does not bring anything good. Cousin, with fury, gritting his teeth, raised his hand and said that the protagonist is a freak, and his mother is a dishonest woman. He loudly ordered Chang-Ting not to behave so arrogantly with him. The protagonist, with fury and veins protruding on his face, loudly said that he should apologize. Cousin, with a malicious grin on his face, put his hand on his cheek and asked, what will happen then, will he cry? Uncle, with a smile on his face, putting his hands on his hips, asked, would Chang-Ting really dare to hit his elders? Cousin, with a sly grin, loudly said that now they will see if he can at least bring him to his senses a little. The protagonist, with great force, punched uncle in the face. His body quickly flew to the side, hitting the floor. Cousin picked up the bottle with great speed, jumped forward with the intention of attacking him. Chang-Ting, with great force, kicked his stomach, leaving streams of air behind it. Cousin, sitting on the floor shaking, put his hand on his stomach and loudly said that he would call the police. He will make sure that he is put in jail. The protagonist, leaving the room, laughed loudly. Uncle, shaking, sitting on the couch, said that this freak dares to hit him. Cousin, looking at him, asked if uncle knows Director Wang. Cousin will make sure that Chang-Ting ends up in jail. At the same time, the protagonist, collecting his things, thought that with the second wave of the Seed of the Abyss, the whole world will really change. Until then, he will not create a tense atmosphere, especially since the current judicial system has not yet been restructured. He said with a serious expression that he hoped the old man underground would be able to give a good overview. After a while, Chang-Ting came out of the room dragging a suitcase behind him. He said with a stern expression that there were only 3 days left. They should enjoy life while they can. The relatives looked at each other in surprise. Uncle looked ahead in amazement and asked, did the main character really give them the house? Cousin clenched his fist in anger and said loudly that this freak did not consider them human. He called out loudly to uncle and told him to call Director Wang. After some time, the hotel with bright signs stands under the night sky. Chang-Ting put the document on the reception desk and asked for a room with a double bed for 3 days. A woman with a smile on her face standing behind the counter raised a cigarette and asked if he was on a business trip. Maybe the protagonist would like a massage. Their girls are experts in their field. Chang-Ting, with flushed cheeks, declined the offer and thanked her. He wondered if he should look for another hotel. However, this one was the closest to the teleportation array. The woman reached out to his hand and loudly told him not to be shy and to let her take care of him tonight. The main character quickly stepped back, moved his hand and said that she shouldn't do that. The woman holding his document in her hand said that his room was number 208. He shouldn't rush to refuse, maybe he'll change his mind. After some time, in one of the hotel rooms, Chang Ting became embarrassed and sighed heavily. In the next room, the girl was providing amazing services. The main character couldn't listen to this any longer and screamed, covering his ears. He put a pillow over his face and tried to convince himself that he couldn't hear anything. He only needed to endure 2 days. Loud noises are coming from room 209. Madame Muccio, covering her ears with her hands from the loud noises behind the wall, screamed loudly. Aunt Bai, sitting on the bed reading a book, turned to the madam and said that this hotel is closest to her destination. She asked Muccio to be patient. The madam, with an angry look, thought that this was annoying her. She calmly turned to the aunt and asked what she thought about this. Bai, with a thoughtful look, put her hand on her chin and said that judging by her voice and breathing, it seems she is lying. Judging by the guy's breathing, the aunt thinks that everything will be over in 10 seconds. Muccio quickly got out of bed and loudly asked what she was talking about. The madam was asking about an abandoned building. Bai, with a smirk on her face, asked her to express her thoughts better. She said with an ominous look, according to the information from the head of the family, the world has really changed. At this point, in order to survive in this world, they have no choice but to defeat those strange monsters. Auntie looked forward with a serious expression and said that she would help her kill the monsters so that the mistress could gain abilities. Muccio confidently agreed with her loudly. Bai smiled and gave a thumbs up and asked if she saw it. Exactly 10 seconds passed. Muccio looked at her and asked loudly, "What is this?" She raised her hands and called out loudly to Auntie. 2 days later, at 11:30 at night, the moon illuminated an abandoned building shrouded in steam. Qingyu shook as he took the protagonist's hand and asked if it was dangerous. Chang Ting looked at him with a smile and said that the second-level monsters were weak to him. His friend just needed to stay close to him. Qingyu sighed with a red face and asked if the protagonist was confident that he could handle them. Chang Ting walked forward with a smirk and said that he could rely on him. His friend pointed his finger to the side with a smile on his face and said loudly that if anything went wrong, he would use him as bait to escape. The protagonist put his hands in his pockets with confusion and asked, "Are they still friends?" Qingyu crossed his arms and loudly agreed with him. Chang Ting looked at the phone in his hand and said that there were still 30 minutes. His friend asked, would people who also wanted to defeat the monsters come running here? The protagonist confidently told him not to worry, that would not happen. He thought that in the novel, those who wanted to defeat them had not yet appeared at this time. The people had not yet realized reality, so this was his chance. They quickly turned their heads to the sides and asked, "What was that over there?" Chang Ting quickly grabbed his friend and jumped to the side. Muccio and Bai looked forward with confident faces standing in the air currents. Qingyu asked, "Isn't that Muccio?" The protagonist, hiding behind the wall, thought that this couldn't be, they weren't in the novel. He looked away with a serious expression and said loudly, "That's why." Chang Ting was amazed and thought that he was such a fool. It's not that no one got the reward here. In fact, they were killed by monsters. Muccio, with a drop of sweat on her face, turned to her aunt. Bai put her hand on her shoulder and said that she was nearby and they could go. Qingyu said with a serious expression that if he remembered correctly, Muccio's family had considerable influence. The girl next to her was probably a special forces officer. He looked forward with a tense expression and asked, "Aren't they going to take the reward?" Chang Ting said with a stern expression that he wouldn't let anyone take it. After some time, in an abandoned building, Muccio asked with a tense expression, "Would monsters really come from here?" Bai knelt down, touched the mark and agreed with her. She said that according to intelligence, the monsters appeared from something like a magic circle. Bai stood up, put her hand down her pants, and said that they were no match for the beasts of this world. Lian held out her hand with explosives and said that she would set a bomb that would seriously injure the monster but not kill it. Bai seriously handed the mistress a gun and said that she would have to deal the finishing blow. Muccio confidently loaded the gun and loudly said that she understood everything. Qingyu, shaking, sitting on the iron structure at the top of the building, asked, "Did they really have to climb up here?" Chang Ting put his hand on his knee and asked, "Did he really have a better idea?" The friend said that he didn't have a better idea. The protagonist looked down with interest and wondered, did they really use dynamite? As far as he could see, neither of them had any abilities. Even if they managed to mortally injure the first monster, they wouldn't be able to do the same to the second one. This would only anger him. Chang Ting thought with a smile on his face that in any case, It meant that he just needed to focus on the gorilla. The time was 11 o'clock 59 minutes, 55 seconds left. Bai, with a stern look, held the button in his hand and began the countdown of the seconds until the monsters appeared. They quickly looked forward with determined faces and loudly said that there was no time left. A magic circle appeared on the ground with dark mana emitting. Clouds of smoke quickly surrounded the mana beams. 2 monsters instantly appeared on the magic circle. Someone loudly asked, "Are there really 2 of them?" They were very lucky to have this. The protagonist looked down and said that they were fools. Bai quickly pressed the button and loudly said that it needed to be done now. A powerful explosion thundered through the building, raising streams of smoke. Bai, with a smirk on her face, stood in the smoke and loudly ordered the lady to get ready. Muchio, with a stern look on her face, looked forward, raised her gun and loudly agreed with her. The gorilla raised his paws standing in the dark smoke and loudly roared. Bai gritted her teeth, quickly looked forward and asked, "Did it really not work?" Muchio confidently held a gun in her hands and said loudly, "One of them was seriously injured." The gorilla looked at the monkey lying on the ground. The monster with a terrifying look ran forward at great speed with the intention of attacking. Bai fired fire bullets from her gun at the gorilla. She held the gun in front of her with a stern look and looked forward. The gorilla jumped forward at great speed above their heads. Bai grabbed the lady's hand and loudly told her to run. The gorilla with a terrifying aura in its eyes raised its fist with the intention of attacking. They quickly jumped aside from the powerful blow. The monster with a bright aura in its eyes waved its hand, pushing them forward. Bai, with a tired look lying on the ground, stretched out her hand to the side and asked her to run. Muchio, shaking while sitting on the ground, made a sound from fatigue. She quickly looked at the huge gorilla attacking her and loudly said, "This can't be." Bai, with tears in her eyes, loudly told him not to do this. The protagonist instantly appeared in front of her and threw the gorilla back with great force. The monster gritted his teeth and looked forward, sitting near the cracked wall. Chan Ting confidently looked forward, clenching his hand into a fist. He thought that it was painful with a shaking fist. Muchio, with tears in her eyes, looked away. Bai, stretching out her hand to the side, the lady loudly asked if she was okay. The protagonist, with a serious look, said that they should leave immediately. They would not be able to defeat this monster. Muchio, with tears in her eyes, asked, "Is he Chan Ting? Why is he here?" The protagonist, with a confident look, turned his head towards her and said that there was no time to explain. They must leave here right now. The gorilla, with rage, swiftly jumped over his head, roaring loudly. Chan Ting, crossing his arms in front of his head, raised his leg up. He swiftly grabbed the monster's body with his hands. The protagonist, with a terrifying look, screamed loudly. He spun around with great force and threw the gorilla to the side. Chan Ting put his hand on his knee with a tired look and thought that even though his body had been strengthened tenfold, it was still hard for him to fight this gorilla. The protagonist raised his hand shrouded in mana with a determined look and said loudly that it was time to end this. The gorilla looked through the smoke with a confused look and shaking. Chan Ting confidently held a knife in his hand and jumped forward. He quickly stabbed the weapon into the monster's body. The gorilla screamed loudly in pain with a terrifying look. The protagonist flew forward, leaving behind the monster's blood. The system window announced that it was congratulating the number 1 person. Chan Ting defeated the level 2 abyss monster. The gorilla, shrouded in his own blood, raised his hands and roared loudly in pain. The weapon and stone quickly fell out of his body. The girls looked forward in surprise. The protagonist looked up with a smirk on his face and asked if he was going to go down. Chan Ting loudly said for him to be faster. Qingyu angrily asked loudly, how did he think he should get down from here? The protagonist said with an irritated look that his friend could not do anything. Qingyu angrily asked loudly, what did he say? Chan Ting quickly jumped up from the ground. He grabbed his friend with a smirk on his face and jumped down. The protagonist pointed his finger at the monster lying on the broken ground and told him to finish it off. Muchio loudly said for them to wait. Chan Ting asked, are they still here? The lady thanked him with a serious look for helping them. Bai, with a stern look holding Muchio's hand, said that she was very grateful that the protagonist saved the lady. Chan Ting stretched out his hand and said no matter what they said, he would not give him to them. Bai angrily said loudly that in that case they would offer him very favorable conditions. Qingyu looked away with a sad expression and asked, maybe we should listen to them? The protagonist extended a knife towards his friend and said that he had defeated the monster and that Qingyu should finish it off. The friend gripped the handle of the knife and said loudly that he understood him. Qingyu quickly stabbed the knife into the monkey while kneeling. The system window announced that it congratulated man number 1666. He had defeated the second-level abyss monster. Qingyu raised his hand in surprise and asked loudly, "What was that thing?" The protagonist looked at his friend and loudly told him not to make noise. Muchio turned to his aunt and said that they were leaving. Bai said with a serious expression that they would meet again. It seemed that his information was more accurate than hers. Changting didn't have to worry, they weren't going to ask unnecessary questions, but she had a request. Could he help them track down the monster next time? In return, they will give him whatever the protagonist wants. Changting put his hand on his chin with a thoughtful look. Bai said with a confident look that there was nothing the Mu family couldn't do. The protagonist calmly extended his hand and said that he thought it was time for them to go. Bai, with a smile on her face, extended her hand forward and thanked him. She said loudly that once he made a decision, he should contact Muchio. Changting closed his eyes and sighed heavily. The protagonist smiled and held a stone in his hand and said that his friend should now eat this stone. He quickly threw the stone into his mouth. His body was quickly covered in dark mana, lifting him into the air. The system window notified that the lonely soul had been activated. The effect of strengthening the body increases physical strength and endurance by 10 times. The second effect, the speed of his body's reaction is doubled. The ability improvement is 10%. Changting sighed heavily with beads of sweat on his face. He showed his hand with a smile on his face and asked, "Is this a 10% improvement?" This is quite good for him. The protagonist squeezed his shoulder with his hand and said that Qingyu doesn't look very good. What is his ability? His friend sadly scratched his head and said that he has eagle vision. It seems that now he can see what is happening at a distance of 2 kilometers. He doesn't think it will be useful in battles. Changting with a smile on his face hit him with his elbow and loudly said that he got a good ability. Qingyu with a joyful look scratched his head and laughed. The protagonist with a serious look held a weapon in his hand and said that the gun was his. The system window notified that this was a level 1 fire attack. Its effect, the range is 500 meters. It deals 10% of his physical strength damage, setting the target on fire and reducing its movement speed by 10%. The number of fire bullets is 5 pieces. The recovery time of the bullet is 10 seconds. Changting with a smile on his face looked forward and said that this was quite good. He looked at his friend and asked what his weapon-related ability was. Qingyu, with a smile on his face, raised his gun and said loudly that it was accuracy. As long as the target was in sight, he would always hit it. The damage for every 5th shot increased by 10% of his maximum health. The protagonist, showing his thumb, said loudly that it was cool. Qingyu, with a red face, said that it was all thanks to him. Changting, with a joyful look, threw his hand over his shoulder and loudly said that they were going home. When they woke up tomorrow, the world would completely change. The friend, with a smile on his face, walked forward and loudly said that this world was in their hands. After a while, many cars were driving down the street. Bai, holding the steering wheel in her hand, apologized into the microphone in her ear and said that it was because of her abilities. She, with a serious look, did not have time to finish speaking and agreed with the man. Bai said into the microphone in the earphone that Muchio's classmate was called Changting. Tomorrow she would study his biography well. Bai put 2 fingers to the earphone, turning it off. She sighed heavily, looking forward with an angry expression. After some time in the hotel, the protagonist sat on his bed. Qingyu raised his hand and asked if he really lived in this hotel. Changting looked at him and said that he had already gotten used to it. The friend should do it too. Qingyu showed 5 fingers on his hand and said that he had more than 500 yuan with him. And how much money does the protagonist have with him? Changting threw his head back and said that he still had a little, but the currency would soon lose its value. Qingyu looked away with a sarcastic grin on his face. The protagonist crossed his arms and said loudly that he would never do that. The friend covered his mouth with a sarcastic grin and said that he hadn't even said anything. As expected, this bad guy already had such thoughts. The man said loudly that he would leave his food at the door. Changting said as he walked towards the door that it didn't matter. They needed to eat and go to bed. In 8 hours, Qingyu had to prepare to wake up in a new world. He walked out the door and bent down to pick up the bag of food. Rose looked back with a serious expression. They quickly looked at each other standing in the hotel corridor. Changting, his face flushed, scratched his head and laughed. He walked into the room, sighed and said loudly that nothing had happened. After a while, the protagonist, putting his chopsticks to his food, thought that tomorrow at 8 in the morning the sun would disappear. Instead, a green sun would appear. In the novel, it was called Emerald. When it appeared, the world turned green. All of humanity heard a mysterious voice saying that the earth was under the control of the abyss. The whole world finally believed in the seriousness of what was happening. An international emergency conference was held. When the third and fourth teleportation zones appeared, people with powerful abilities also began to appear. The world changed completely. Then the countries united to form and train a special response team. Together with scientists from all over the world, a new weapon was invented to fight the monsters of the abyss. However, humanity was unable to win. Even advanced weapons could not withstand the monsters of the abyss. Qingyu asked with a serious expression, holding out his chopsticks, "There are not many people who have the same abilities as them. Doesn't this mean that they are currently the strongest in the world? What rank would he give him in the ranking of capable people?" Chang Ting, holding chopsticks with food in his hand, said that there are currently about 200 people in the world with abilities. So he thinks that a friend would be at least in 30th place. The protagonist quickly looked away in surprise. Qingyu, with a red face, holding chopsticks in his hand, asked, "Is it really in 30th place? Is he really that incredible?" Qingyu waved his hand and asked, "What's wrong with him?" Chang Ting quickly ran to the door and said that he would be right back. Qingyu thought while eating that he was sure that the protagonist had been reincarnated. He thought with tears in his eyes, why wasn't it him? After a while, the woman at the front desk asked, "Was it really a well-dressed and beautiful girl?" She apologized and said that they didn't have any. The woman holding a cigarette in her hand said that although there was one girl who came and went whenever she wanted. The woman with a smile on her face said that she didn't know why she came here. After all, she could earn more in a much nicer place. Chang Ting with a smile on his face said loudly that she was the one he was looking for. The woman with an interest on her face asked if he really knew her. The protagonist asked with a joyful look what room Rose was staying in. The woman raised her hands to the side, apologized to him, and said that she couldn't divulge information about their clients. Chang Ting quickly put the money on the reception desk. The woman with a smile on her face pointed to the side and said loudly that Rose was in room 502. The protagonist approached the elevator, thanked her, and said loudly that if she had any problems because of this, she could just come to him, and he would help. The woman loudly told Chang Ting not to even think about telling anyone about this. The protagonist pressed the elevator button with a serious look. He thought that in this world there are 12 users of the highest level of abilities, known as the 12 stars. Each of them is powerful enough to destroy an entire city by himself. The abilities are named according to the 12 signs of the zodiac. Among them, there is a woman who has the ability of Scorpio the Destroyer. That is why she also calls herself Scorpio. She is among the top 5 among them. Her name was never mentioned in the book, and nothing is known about her origin and past. She has a tattoo of roses on her back. Scorpio is very cruel to men. Rose takes pleasure in torturing and humiliating them. It was assumed that she had a specific job in the past. It seems that she has a room where she keeps captured men. The protagonist, when leaving the elevator, thought that she had a rose tattoo and a specific job. Most likely she is Scorpio. Chang Ting clenched his fists and looked at the door to the room with a bright pink light coming from it and thought, even if he was right, what should he tell Rose? She really doesn't like men. Would she even want to talk to Chang Ting? Rose calmly put her hand on the wall and opened the door and looked at him. She put her hand on her cheek and asked, "Is he that guy?" The protagonist raised his hands and greeted her. Scorpio stretched out her hand to his face and asked, "Did he really follow her?" Chang Ting, with a red face, did not agree with her. Rose approached his ear and put her hand on the protagonist's shoulder and sighed and said that it would be 3,000 at a time. She would not bargain. Chang Ting shamefully ran down the corridor and loudly said that he did not mean that. Scorpio crossed her arms with a serious look and looked forward and said that there was something strange about this child. It seems that she can no longer stay here. After some time, the main character sat on the bed, put his hand on his face and asked loudly, "What was that?" "He will just go to bed." At 7:59 in the morning, Qingyu woke up, turned to Chang Ting and asked if he could sleep a little longer. The main character looked out the window and said that there was 1 minute left. Qingyu quickly ran to the window and said that with the sun. He clenched his teeth and looked ahead. Powerful rays of green mana quickly flew forward. Chang Ting with a serious look loudly said that everything was starting. After some time, the city completely changed its color to green. The guy rubbed his eyes with his hands and asked if his eyesight was failing him, or had the sun just turned green. People looked around in surprise and said loudly that they could see it too. Is this some kind of joke? What is going on here? Powerful rays of green mana headed forward. At the same time, Rose, walking down the street, put her hand on her face and said that she was very sleepy. It's not surprising, because that guy woke her up at night. The scorpion just wants to get to the new hotel as quickly as possible and rest. She looked up in surprise and asked if the sun had really turned green. Rose closed her eyes with a grin and said that the doctor hadn't told her that sick patients could develop color blindness. She held out her hand to the green light with a grin on her face and said that it was very beautiful. A powerful stream of green rays appeared above her hand. Rose, reaching out to it, saw a scorpion in the starry sky. She quickly fell to the ground, dropping her suitcase. The main character, gritting his teeth, looking at the green light, told his friend to get ready. The monster loudly addressed the Earthlings. He said that he thought that some of them had already received gifts. Now they had abilities that were far superior to those of other people. From that day on, their game officially began. The monster's huge head quickly appeared in the sky. He said with an ominous grin that they would call their game the War of the Abyss. They, the Abyss monsters, would pass through the teleportation circles connecting the Earth and the Abyss and end up in their world. If humans defeated the Abyss monsters, they would gain strength that surpassed humans. The Abyss would open up all over the Earth. The portals were numbered from 1 to 99, and each of them had 999 arenas. They, the humans, would win if they passed through all the abysses and defeated the last monster. They would lose if the monsters devoured the last human on Earth. He was talking too much. The less they knew about the game, the more interesting it would be. He wished them good luck and a good fight. Immediately after, the giant head disappeared. Qingyu was very surprised by this and asked loudly, "Humanity will win, right?" Changting stood there silently for a few seconds and recalled what happened in the novel. He calmly said that he would definitely do it this time. Qingyu was very confused by this and asked what he meant. At the same time, Muweigwa stood in the office and said that this was a summary of information from around the world. Everything they just heard was true. The Earth had become a playground for unknown creatures. Zhou Wanli slammed the table and said loudly that they must exterminate them with firearms. No creature in this world would survive this. He recommended immediately declaring martial law throughout the country. Once the portals opened, the military would immediately destroy them without involving civilians. Wang Wenfeng stood up and said loudly that according to the latest data, firearms were useless against the monsters from the second portal. They had no idea whether any firearms would work against the next monsters. Wanli asked, then what did he think they should do? Wenfeng asked, how about setting up a special response team? They will gather people with superpowers to fight the Abyss monsters. Weigwa said that he seemed to be right. Only by uniting them would they be able to control them better. He left it to Wenfeng. He called Wanli and said that if something like that happened, the country would fall into chaos and unrest. The task of maintaining internal stability would fall on his shoulders. All the people stood up and agreed with him. After a while, Qingyu was walking down the street and asked what they would do now. Changting said that a special team would soon be formed to fight the Abyss monsters. Qingyu asked, are they going to join them? Changting refused and said that they would cooperate with them as mercenaries. He thought that the protagonist in the book had lost his freedom and a lot of opportunities when he joined this team. He would never make such a mistake. He said that although joining them would give many advantages, their actions would be too limited. Qingyu asked, where are they going then? Changting said with a serious expression that he had some personal matters to take care of first. So they would train until the next time the Abyss seeds appeared. Qingyu thought about his personal matters, put his finger on his throat and asked, is he talking about his uncle? He put his hand on his shoulder and said that he would support him no matter what he did. However, he hoped that he would not become a criminal. After all, they were supposed to be heroes who would save the world. Changting looked at him with a smile and said that he didn't have to worry about it. At the same time, his cousin was drinking in his house and said loudly that it was incredible. They had just gotten the house and at this moment the Abyss monsters appeared. That freak should have given them the house earlier. The uncle said that he should calm down and just enjoy the moment. He looked at the table and said loudly that they were out of alcohol, so he should go buy some more. He looked at his son and noticed that there was a small cut on his throat. He saw Changting with a knife in his hand and screamed loudly out of fear. He looked at his uncle with a calm face and said that he would be next. The frightened uncle looked at him and said loudly that it was a crime, he was the real killer. Chan Ting calmly said that he knew about it. The man was shaking with fear and said loudly that he was his uncle and he would make a mistake. Aren't they one family? Chan Ting got really angry about this and said loudly that when his mother was alive, they abused them in every way. She was seriously injured and went to the hospital. They drove her to the grave. Even after she died, they came to the house she left him. They took everything from him. And this is what he calls family? How could he do all this and continue to enjoy life without feeling even a drop of guilt? The uncle started crying and said that he should wait. He asks for his forgiveness and understands that he was wrong. He will tell him the secret that he wants to hear. Chan Ting swung the knife and said that he will make sure that the same fate befalls him. The uncle covered his head with his hands and said loudly that he knows who killed his mother. Chan Ting was very surprised by what he said and looked at him with a shocked expression. He looked at him with a very serious expression and asked who it was. The uncle opened his eyes slightly and said that it was Director Wang's nephew. That day, he got behind the wheel drunk and crashed into his mother's car. Chan Ting looked at him with a displeased expression and asked how he knew this. The uncle said that he and Director Wang went out to drink together. He drank too much and told him everything. He got so much money because he threatened him. Chan Ting asked, so that's why after so many years the criminal has not been found yet? The uncle started to run away and said that he told him everything and asked him not to kill him. He looked at him with a displeased expression and thought that he would never forgive him for this. Suddenly, Chan Ting stabbed him with a knife and he felt a lot of pain. The uncle fell to the ground and cried out in pain and began to shake because of it. Qingyu entered the house and saw the uncle who had just been killed, lying on the ground in a pool of his own blood. Chan Ting said that in the future, a lot of people would die. With time, he would get used to it. He would collect everything they needed and they would train his eagle vision for the next 2 weeks. They went to another room and took 2 backpacks and put the things they needed in them. Chan Ting looked at him and asked if he was ready. Qingyu looked at him with a smile and agreed to it. 2 weeks later, Bai was riding in the car and said that she did not expect Chan Ting to want to cooperate with them. This time, she is confident that she can obtain the ability. Mu Chiu said that he is really a mysterious person. She can't even imagine how he lived before. Bai said that she had done her best to find out about him, but she had found nothing remarkable. The only thing they could be sure of was that he had an unusual past. Mu Chiu said that this must be the abandoned factory he had spoken of. There was already someone there. They saw Qingyu, who had changed a lot, and she asked loudly, who was he? They stopped next to him and got out of the car. He looked at them with a smile and said that they had finally arrived. Mu Chiu was very surprised when she heard his voice, remembered him, and asked loudly with a surprised look, was it really him? Qingyu asked with a smile, had it only been a few days, and they had already forgotten him? Bai said thoughtfully that when people gain strength, their appearance and behavior change a little, but this is too much, it's like he's a different person. Qingyu caught the backpack that was thrown to him from the side. Chan Ting walked towards him calmly and said that he should stop talking and get in the car. After that, he walked to the back door of the car and got in. Qingyu looked at him with a smile and asked, is he pretending to be cool? Bai got behind the wheel and asked where they were going. Chan Ting calmly said that the 3rd portal would appear in the city, in the underground parking lot. She calmly said that she understood him and would go there. After some time, at night, they arrived at the portal and Bai said that everything was exactly as he said. Chan Ting turned to her and asked, are there any people nearby? She said that there were no traces of people. He said with a smile that a 3rd-level monster would appear in half an hour. They should just focus on defense and leave the rest to him. Qingyu walked towards him with a smile and asked, doesn't he have a capable friend? Chan Ting pushed him away and said that he hoped that he would not make a mistake. At midnight, dark energy appeared at the portal. Chan Ting looked at it calmly and said that a monster was coming. Qingyu looked at it with a surprised look and said that this monster was huge. Chan Ting looked at the monster calmly and said that he didn't need to be afraid. He remembers what he told him, right? Qingyu took out his gun and said that a slime monster would appear. It has 2 types of attacks. It will either spit out corrosive acid or attack with its tentacles. First, it needs to shoot off the tentacles, and then it will attack the monster, right? He pointed the gun at the monster and said with a worried look that they should finish this quickly. Chan Ting looked ahead with a calm look and said that he would definitely defeat this monster. It began to very quickly point its tentacles towards them. Qingyu began to use his skill and shoot his gun. He continued to shoot his gun while Chang Ting ran forward very quickly and stabbed with his dagger. He jumped up and cut off the tentacle on the monster's head with one blow. It started to twitch because of the pain. He loudly told the girls that he had thrown the knife to Muchio and said that she should do it. She caught the knife and agreed to it. She swung the knife to deliver the finishing blow, and did not notice something flying above her. Qingyu noticed it and loudly said that they should step back. Immediately after that, they suddenly jumped back and a huge explosion occurred at the place where they were standing. Chang Ting, with Muchio in his arms, said that there was someone here. The man standing in the distance loudly said that he saved their lives. This time, he would let them go. He walked towards them with several objects in his hand and said that the monster belonged to him. Chang Ting calmly asked, "Does she think there is no one?" It seems that his intelligence capabilities cannot be trusted. Bai apologized and said that it was her mistake. The man said with a smile that now is not the time to shift responsibility to each other, they should leave here. Chang Ting thought that according to the book, the third portal in the city was not discovered immediately. It was only after the fourth portal appeared that the man accidentally found this place and killed the monster. The man walked up to him and asked the guy with a smile, "What is he waiting for?" Chang Ting looked at him calmly and wondered, is it because of the butterfly effect? He continued to look at him with a calm expression and sighed. The man continued to look at him with a smile and asked what was wrong with him. Chang Ting smiled, began to warm up his hand and said that he simply foresaw this situation in advance. He delivered a very fast and unexpected punch, but the man managed to react to it and stopped his attack. He continued to smile and said that he was pretty good. Chang Ting jumped back a few meters away and thought that he had the ability to control iron balls. It must be a manipulation type ability, but he himself was also strong. He said loudly that he should attack. Qingyu heard him and immediately fired several shots from his gun. The man began to control his iron balls and destroyed all the bullets that were flying at him. He said with a calm expression that this world is really amazing. It is amazing that only two guys became so strong. Qingyu looked at him with a calm expression, used the fire attack skill and started shooting his gun. The man looked at him with a smile and said that it was useless. He was very surprised that his iron balls were destroyed by this shot and a bullet hit his shoulder. He fell to his knees, clutched his wounds and cried out in pain. Qingyu said that if he is not good enough, he should not brag. Chang Ting walked calmly towards him and said that he was wounded in the arm, so he should give up resistance, and then he would not kill him. The man did not listen to him, and ran towards him very quickly. He ran up to Qingyu and looked at him with a crazy smile. The man struck a very strong blow with his hand, but he managed to block. Despite this, he was thrown to the side very strongly. Chang Ting immediately jumped towards him and swung his fist to punch. Unexpectedly, the man quickly turned towards him, grabbed his head and slammed him to the ground very hard. Chang Ting immediately began to get up and called out to Qingyu. The man immediately struck with his fist, but he managed to block this blow. Unexpectedly, he struck again and hit his face. He struck many blows with his fists, swung for another blow, and said that it seemed that his ability was to increase strength. He struck his head very hard and said loudly that, however, strength alone was not enough. Bai took out her gun, pointed it at him, and said loudly that he should stop. The man ran towards her very quickly, struck her in the body with his elbow, and she dropped the gun because of it. He looked at Muchio with a smile, and said that she should not act rashly. He went to the monster, and said that he told them to leave here a long time ago. Why don't they listen to their elders? He began to massage his neck and asked if he would have to pay if he went to the hospital to treat the wound. Chang Ting surprised him greatly by screaming to get his attention. The man turned towards the voice and saw him throwing a punch. He looked at him with a very surprised look, and wondered if he was okay. Chang Ting struck him hard with his fist, and sent him flying back several meters. The man fell to the ground and lost consciousness after falling to the ground with a terrifying force. Chang Ting immediately went to Qingyu after that, and called his name loudly. He helped him up and asked if his hands were okay. Qingyu came to his senses and asked, "They won, right?" He checked his hands and said that he could move his hands, and it seemed that nothing was broken. Apparently, the training had done him good. Chang Ting went to Muchio and said that she should kill the monster, and they would leave here. Immediately after that, she walked up to the monster, and stabbed the knife into the monster's head. Chang Ting picked up Bai and said that she should eat this abyssal stone, she should leave all questions for later, and they would leave here. Muchio did as he said and asked, "So this is her ability?" Chang Ting went further and said that she should not stand still, it was time for them to go. After a while, the man came to his senses and wondered what was wrong with this guy and why was he so strong. He called and the person he called asked what took him so long and what happened to him. The man said that he made a mistake and was beaten up by 2 kids. There was not a single living spot left on his face. He stood up and said that it was time to stop talking, he would be right back. After some time, he came to the building, kicked the door down, and said loudly with a dissatisfied look that he was so unlucky to meet them. Rose looked at him and asked her uncle why he was beaten like that. The man sitting next to him asked if there were still people with abilities in City A who could defeat him. The man called him captain and said that he should wipe his mouth first. He could forget about it, those 2 guys were not that simple. One of them shot him in the arm. The other was even scarier, he hit him so hard that he lost consciousness. The captain looked interested and said that since he had knocked him out with 1 blow, his ability was probably strength-based. If they could lure them over, these guys would be of great use to them. The man looked displeased and said that he should go to them himself, since he didn't want to be beaten up by these bastards. The captain called Rose and said that he would leave it to her. She looked at him with a displeased look, slammed her fist on the table, and asked how many times she had to repeat that. He should call her Scorpio. The man looked calm and asked why such a beautiful girl should be called Scorpio. He didn't know what she was thinking. Rose looked serious and used her energy, stopped her hand at his throat, and said that he should watch his tongue if he valued his life. The man looked at her with a displeased look and said that she could try. The captain ordered them to stop and asked if they couldn't be quiet. He looked at them with a very serious and frightening look and said that if they continued to make noise, he would kill them. They were very surprised by this, looked at him, and fell silent. Rose looked away with a smile and said that all he knew how to do was scare people. What did he want to say? The man looked at him with a surprised look and wondered what that was. The captain said with a smile that he was giving her 3 days, if they did not want to join them, she should kill them. Rose said with a smile that she understood him. Some time later in the hospital, the doctor looked at the document in his hand and said that they did not need to worry, Captain Bai's internal organs were not damaged. She only had small cracks in her bones, but everything would heal quickly after a little rest. Muchio said with a smile that she was very happy about this and apologized to Dr. Zhang. The doctor turned around and said that as for that young man, only the muscles were damaged, and the bones were intact. Qingyu raised his hand with a smile and said that it was natural. Suddenly his hand hurt really badly and Zhang asked whose friend this was. Chang Ting said that he didn't know him. The doctor started to leave and said that he would go, they could call him if they needed anything. Mu Chio agreed and said that she was grateful for his hard work. She turned around and said with a sad look that it was their fault. Chang Ting with a calm look said that she didn't have to think about it and that they should forget about it. So what ability did she have? Mu Chio with a happy look said that she would show him now. Chang Ting said that judging from her face, it was something good. She raised her finger and created a small fire. He looked at it and asked if she could control fire? Mu Chio closed her eyes with a smile and said that she couldn't. She created several other elements and said that she could control the elements. Qingyu looked at this with a very surprised look and said loudly that this was incredible. Changting looked at her and thought that the book described 3 categories of such skills: control of 1 element, several elements, and all. Usually, a person can only use the power of 1 element, and only sometimes 2 or 3. As for using all at once, the book described one person with such an ability, but he died quite quickly. However, he was definitely not weaker than the 12 strongest people with abilities. Mu Chio looked at the elements she had created and said that she seemed to have gained enormous power. Chang Ting thought that the water and fire elements could be used for attack, the wood element for use, the earth element for defense, and the metal element could strengthen weapons. Qingyu looked at her with a sad look, called her name, and asked if they should exchange abilities. Chang Ting calmly said that he should stop embarrassing himself. Mu Chio asked with a smile, what is she going to do next? She has some inside information. Chang Ting calmly asked her to tell him about it. She said that the government has begun preparing to establish a special response team to combat the abyss monsters. They are currently recruiting a small number of people with abilities. She is going to join the team and hopes that he will also join them to fight against the abyss seeds and protect the planet. Chang Ting apologized and said that, however, he does not intend to become a member of this group. He thought that it had already started and they were moving quite quickly. Mu Chio said that it would be best to join this group. Even though he was very strong, monsters would still appear one after another in the future. He can't rely on his own strength forever. If he joined the group, he would not only have their support but also excellent logistics. Chang Ting said that, however, he would not be able to act freely. Mu Chiu looked at him with a worried expression and called out his name. He said with a smile that he did not intend to join this group. However, she could rest assured that he would still defend his country, but he would do it in a different way. Mu Chiu said that she was very sorry. If he changed his mind, he could contact her anytime. If he needed anything, he could let her know. Chang Ting said that he really needed something. He looked away with a confused look and said that he needed money. Mu Chiu asked with a big smile, how much did he need? Her family may not have a lot of money, but she has plenty of it. Chang Ting really surprised them by asking if she could give him 100 million? He was confused because she didn't answer, looked away and asked, is that too much? Then at least 50 million. Mu Chiu walked up to him and asked why she felt like he was hiding something. Chang Ting said that she was making it up, he wasn't hiding anything. She agreed and said that she would take his word for it, he could send her the card number, and she would transfer 100 million to him. Qingyu looked at her with a surprised expression and asked, would she really give him that much money? Mu Chiu asked, why not? Chang Ting grabbed him and said that as expected of her, she was a real hero. Then they would go, if they were lucky, they would see each other again. Mu Chiu asked, were they already leaving, where were they in such a hurry? He still needed treatment. Chang Ting smiled and said that it was okay since this scratch wouldn't kill him. Qingyu was angry about this and asked if he wanted to know his opinion. Mu Chiu looked at him thoughtfully and wondered what he was going to do with so much money. Maybe he wanted to form his own group. After that, outside, Qingyu asked, didn't he say that the current monetary system would soon collapse? Why did he need so much money? Chang Ting said that they wanted to set up their own mercenary organization. How could they do that without money? Qingyu smiled and said that from now on, he was the captain and he was the deputy captain. What would they do next? Chang Ting smiled and said that naturally, they would first find a place to set up a base. He thought he said that his uncle was in the real estate business, right? He would leave it to him. He had two conditions. First, the location must be remote and hidden from prying eyes, preferably in the mountains, and it must be completely renovated. Second, it must remain a secret. If necessary, he can scare his uncle. Qingyu looked at him and said that he looked like a villain. He could rely on him, but it would take time. What will they do now? Chang Ting said that there was still time before the next portal opened, so they would continue training. Some time later, in the building where they had trained before. They were tired after training and lay on the floor while the TV was on next to him. The news anchor said that in order to deal with the monsters of the abyss, the governments of all countries are creating a special department to protect the planet. Yesterday, their country completed the construction of the infrastructure of the special department, which is now open in 6 cities. Qingyu asked if they should go take a look. Chang Ting said that he didn't see any sense in that. What's up with their base? He said that it would take another half a month to finish everything. When will the next portal open? He can't wait any longer. Chang Ting stood up and said that it will happen in 3 days, it's time for them to leave already. Rose entered the building and said loudly that she finally found them. Immediately after that, they took out their weapons and looked at her with serious faces. She said with a very angry look that because of the two of them, the captain scolded her for 7 days. She saw Chang Ting, remembered that she met him before and said that it turns out that he also received an ability. Qingyu asked when he managed to meet such a beautiful girl. Chang Ting looked at her and thought, she really is a Scorpio, but why did she come here? Rose sat in front of them and asked, do they have any water? She is so thirsty. Qingyu very quickly took a bottle of water from the table and brought it to her. She took his hand and said that he is also quite handsome. Does he have a girlfriend and what does he think of her? Qingyu was very embarrassed by her appearance, and his face turned very red. Chang Ting calmly asked what she was doing here. Rose said that he should let her introduce herself again. Her name is Scorpio, she is a mercenary of the 12 Stars Squad. The gorilla he recently beat up is a member of their team. Qingyu immediately pointed his gun at her and asked loudly, did she come to avenge him? Rose put his hands down and said that he did not need to be so nervous, she just wanted to ask if they wanted to join them. She walked up to Chang Ting, covered his mouth with her finger, and told him that he shouldn't say anything. Her captain said that she could kill him if he refused. So she hoped that he would think it over carefully. Qingyu calmly said that she was the only one here and there were 2 of them. Suddenly, he felt worse, he grabbed his head and said that she was not playing fair. Chang Ting was very surprised by what happened and looked at him with a worried look. Rose looked at him with a smile and said that at first he called her beautiful and now he was insulting her, but he quickly changed his attitude. Her face quickly became more serious and said that now he should answer her question. The poisoned Chang Ting and Qingyu looked at her with worried looks and did not say anything. Someone entered this building and loudly said that he finally found this girl with poison. They turned towards the voice and saw a grown man with 3 guys. Chang Ting looked at them and asked who they were. Rose said that they were a squad of poisonous stings who were at odds with them. She was careful on the way here, so how were they able to track her down? The man said with a very dissatisfied look that he finally caught her. He would break her arms and legs, throw her out in the mountains and watch the wolves eat her. Chang Ting calmly asked what she had done to him. Rose calmly said that she had castrated him. He was very surprised by this and asked what she said. The man said with a dissatisfied look that she was really crazy, and now she was servicing 2 guys at once. Although, this would only flatter this vile woman. Rose was very angry about this, loudly called him baldly and said that it looked like he was seeking death. He became angry and loudly said that she would be the one who would die today. He had studied her methods well and prepared himself. Immediately after that, she began to emit strong energy with a frightening face. She said that she had removed the poison from their bodies, she would detain them, and they should leave. After all, it did not concern them. Immediately after that, she released her poisonous energy into a group of these guys. The man loudly called Lao Er and calmly looked at the approaching energy. The guy with the bat calmly stepped forward and created a magical barrier, with which he stopped her attack. Rose was very surprised by this, and the guy looked at her with a sly smile. Li said loudly that his ability was purification, which suppressed her poison. The guy with dyed hair raised his hands and released a wave of wind. With this attack, he hit Rose and she began to cough loudly because of this attack. Li pointed his hand at her, ordered to kill her, and the guys immediately ran towards her. They stopped because Qingyu shot at the floor in front of them, and they were very surprised that they had firearms. He calmly said that they should stand still, otherwise the next bullet would fly into his head. Chang Ting walked towards them, began to warm up his fists, and said that she was in great debt to them. Lao Er told the boss that he should leave, because he was afraid that these 2 were quite capable, so they did not have the slightest chance of winning. Li said with a disappointed look that they should leave here. Rose said loudly with a dissatisfied look that they can't let them leave, they should kill them. The guy standing behind used his skill and they ran away from that building very quickly. Rose ran out of the building and loudly called them idiots. Chang Ting turned to her and asked why she wanted them to help her kill them. She sighed and said that it was her fault. They had insulted them today, so they would definitely want revenge. It seemed like the only way the 2 of them could save their lives was if they joined her group. Chang Ting asked with a smile if she would listen to the proposal he had. Rose asked if he wanted her to join him, right? He agreed and extended his hand and said that she could join them. She looked at him and asked if he was serious. He was quite interesting, however, she wouldn't join their group that easily. Chang Ting thought about it and asked if she was hurt. Rose said with a smile that her ability wasn't just using poison. Qingyu looked at her with a dissatisfied expression and asked, "Isn't she up to something again?" Rose turned to him with a smile and asked, "Beautiful girls are born to be deceivers, that's their nature, isn't it?" She started to leave, bidding him farewell with a smile, and said that she owed them for saving her. Qingyu sighed and said that human hearts were full of evil. Chang Ting said that this was terrible. Now they were not only being chased by the 12 stars, but they had also offended someone dangerous. It was time for them to leave. This place had been exposed and there was no point in them staying here anymore. Qingyu asked with a smile, there was still time before the next portal opened, right? Chang Ting agreed and said that the 4th portal would open soon in City F. It seemed like they would have to go there earlier, so he should think of it as an opportunity before the battle. Sometime later in another city, Qingyu pointed at something and said that he should look there. He pointed to a building with a sign that said District 6, the registration office for the Special Response Team. He asked if they should go there and take a look. Chang Ting looked at that building with a calm expression and didn't say anything. Qingyu started pushing him towards the building and said with a smile that he should agree to it. Chang Ting reluctantly agreed to it, and he thought that it was just in time. They would see if the capable people described in the book would show up. In any case, it is possible to try to defeat someone. They entered the building. A man immediately approached them and greeted them. He asked with a slight smile, "Did they come to register?" Chang Ting asked, "Only people with abilities can register?" The man said with a smile, "Of course that is not the case, they do not need to have special abilities to do so. As long as they have the relevant experience, they can join them. They should let him introduce himself. His name is Chi Ji Yuan, he is in charge of recruitment in the 6th district." Chang Ting was very surprised when he heard his name. Ji Yuan adjusted his glasses and asked, "Is he surprised because of this?" Chang Ting said with a smile, his friend had the same name, so he was surprised. He thought that in the book, almost all the strong people had one thing in common: they all had extremely powerful abilities. However, there were people who did not have any abilities but still had power in the world. The most frightening of them was a man named Ji Yuan. The book does not describe that era in such detail, but there is still some information. He originally worked for the government, but later became disillusioned with it when his city was destroyed and formed his own mercenary squad. No one knew what abilities he had, they only knew that he was a man who could perform miracles and led a squad against monsters many times. The most shocking thing was the simultaneous defeat of 3 level 61 abyss seeds. At that time, even the 12 strongest people could not defeat a monster higher than level 50 alone. Moreover, Ji Yuan once had a conflict with one of the 12 strongest people and he defeated him. Since then, everyone believed that his abilities were superior to those of everyone else, and he was even called a king for a time. Until the middle of the novel, he was surrounded by hundreds of small squads, but in the end, they were all destroyed. Before his death, Ji Yuan told his comrades that he was an ordinary person with no abilities. Chang Ting thought that it would be great if he joined them. He asked if he could tell them about this place. Even if they don't have abilities, they still want to protect the country. Ji Yuan adjusted his glasses, agreed with a smile, and said that they can go to his office and he will tell them everything in detail. After a while, the 3 men are sitting in a restaurant and saying that he heard that the security here is very tight. There are many armed soldiers inside, but there are no fewer outside. Their defense is really strong, but he just used his ability and found out that there are only 3 capable people in the building and they are no match for them. The man pressed his earphone with a smile and asked Jas if he was there. The guy with a gun in his hand standing on the roof smiled and told the boss that he was already in position. They can launch the attack at any time. The man smiled and said that there are 5 minutes left until the start, and 15 minutes to complete the task. At the same time, Ji Yuan was sitting in his office with the others. He put 3 cups on the table and poured tea for everyone. He said with a smile that they could try it, it was his favorite tea. Chang Ting thanked him for it, and said that they liked tea though. Ji Yuan said that it seemed like the 2 of them were being extremely cautious. Then they could stop this empty dialogue. He asked with a serious expression, what was their real purpose? They were both surprised because of what he just said. He asked with a serious expression, they must have powers, right? And they didn't come here to engage them. He looked at Chang Ting and said that he definitely knew him. He raised his hand and asked, was he wary of that? He just had the same name as his friend, that's true. Ji Yuan said with a calm expression that he had a special ability since childhood. To be precise, it was intuition. He could recognize things that ordinary people couldn't, from facial expressions, emotions, movements, gait, and even smell. He knows him very well, but the problem is that he doesn't know him. So he wants to know who he is and what is their purpose in coming here. Chang Ting looked at him with a slightly worried expression and thought that he had a very oppressive aura. He stood up and said that he understood that he was being cautious in this situation, but he could believe that they were ordinary people. Ji Yuan said that he knew that one couldn't draw conclusions from ordinary conversation. In that case, they could send them to the department responsible for interrogation. Suddenly, walls of energy appeared around them. Ji Yuan said that this device was specially designed for people with abilities. Even those who could overcome the 3rd level abyss seed couldn't. Chang Ting struck the wall, and cracks immediately appeared. Ji Yuan was very surprised that he was able to damage this wall. With the next strike, he broke this door and thought that he was really strong, but it was not even close to this. He said that he admitted that he did have abilities, but he still hoped that he would believe him. They had no bad intentions. Ji Yuan looked at him calmly and thought that it seemed like his ability was physical enhancement. However, if he could break a 3rd level cage, his ability must be of a higher level? He said that now he had no choice but to believe him. After all, if they wanted to do something to him, he wouldn't be able to resist. Chang Ting asked with a kind smile, did he really look like a bad guy? He was about to say something else, but because of the unexpected explosion behind him, he couldn't finish his sentence. He immediately turned to look in that direction and looked with a worried expression. Ji Yuan clicked his tongue with a dissatisfied expression as he looked at him. His pants were torn and there were other pants with some kind of device on them. He quickly swung his leg and released a powerful air wave towards them. The fire died down and Ji Yuan thought, is this not a normal physical enhancement? Can his ability withstand elemental attacks? He was burned. It seems he is not immune to such attacks. The loudspeaker said several times that the office was under heavy fire attack and all departments should prepare. Chang Ting said that he should believe them. It has nothing to do with them. They are willing to help with this, but he should trust them. Ji Yuan looked at him with a thoughtful look and thought that his eyes were telling him that he was not lying, so he will believe him. He ran out into the corridor and said loudly that the enemy has heavy firearms. They should follow him to the lobby on the first floor. Immediately after the attack began, the screens on the buildings opened and many guns moved out. Joss looked at this with a dissatisfied look and asked, can they counterattack in such a short time? It seems he underestimated them, but unfortunately it is useless. He took aim with his gun, and it started emitting very strong energy. He fired several shots and destroyed the top of the building. Joss told the boss with a big smile that he had successfully suppressed their resistance. After hearing that, he said with a smile that it was great news. The man in the lobby said that someone dared to attack their office. After that attack, a group of several people entered the building. Their boss asked with a smile that a minute would be enough, right? The guy standing next to him said that he underestimated him. 10 seconds would be enough for him. The boss started counting down with a smile. The guy sighed and said with a smile that he was indeed a very strict person. Several people with abilities ran towards them and said loudly that their behavior was already an act of terrorism, so they should surrender. The guy from the gang started moving very fast while 3 people with abilities were flying towards them to attack. He grabbed a knife, ran very quickly behind them and stopped. He looked back with a smile and said that it took exactly 10 seconds. One of the soldiers gave the order to open fire and several men started firing their machine guns. The boss calmly snapped his fingers and stopped all the bullets that were flying towards him. One of the soldiers was very scared because of what he saw and said that it was impossible, it was a monster. The boss controlled the bullets with his ability and said that it was such an amazing view. He fired many bullets back at the soldiers who were shooting at him. He bowed and said with a smile that he was grateful to them. They had 14 minutes left, they should split up and get information. One of his group said loudly that he had to be careful. The boss managed to stop the bullet at the last moment with his ability, and was very surprised because of it. Qingyu was the one who shot him and greeted them with a smile. Joss said that the information was wrong. Another person with an ability appeared, and it seems that he is the same as him. He wants to play with him. The boss asked calmly, so what is he waiting for then? Joss began to use very strong energy, and said that he would activate the explosive bomb mode and load the assault ammunition. Ji Yuan asked with a dissatisfied look, who is he? The boss asked with a smile, he is in charge of this place, right? He should let him introduce himself. His name is John West, and he belongs to the mercenary group Rose Dance. Chang Ting looked at them and thought that there was no mention of this group in the novel. It seems they were not very famous. Ji Yuan calmly asked who sent them here? John apologized and said that as professional mercenaries, they cannot divulge information about their employer. If he wants to know, he should go to hell and ask the demons. Joss's bullet flew towards them while their back was turned. Qingyu noticed this shot and said loudly that they should be careful, they have a sniper. He quickly turned around and deflected his bullet with a shot from his gun. They started shooting at the same time, and he hit the sniper's bullets. Joss said loudly with a big smile that this was excellent, he had the same ability, so he should show him more. He picked up one bullet and said with a smile that he would see if he could catch this bullet. He fired a shot and released a very strong stream of energy. Qingyu looked at it with a worried look and thought that this bullet was different from the others. He fired a very strong shot from his gun and said loudly that, however, he had a fire attack. Because of this attack, there was a very strong explosion and a lot of dust flew out onto the street. John said with a smile that it looked like he had met a worthy opponent. Joss said with a smile to the boss that he was underestimating him. After all, he still had an ace up his sleeve. Qingyu said with a calm look that the opponent had a very strong sniper. What should he do? Chang Ting took a fighting stance and said that their opponents were trained mercenaries, and they also had a strong sniper. Their combat power was very weak, and under such circumstances, they had no chance of winning. He grabbed their hands and ran to the side very quickly, and said loudly that in that case, they should run. He kicked down the wall and ran inside. John looked at them with a smile and said that it was a smart decision. Joss told the boss that he had already targeted him and was waiting for permission to open fire. John said that their mission was a priority, so he shouldn't shoot. He put his weapon away and said that he was sorry, because he had finally met someone with the same ability. Chang Ting stopped and said that it should be safe here. He apologized, but in that situation, he could only make such a decision. Ji Yuan said that he made the right choice, but he underestimated the special response team of this country. He took out the phone that was attached to his leg. He called and said that they should inform the special response teams so that they could take action. Ji Yuan lit a cigarette and said that they needed to go back. Chang Ting looked at him and thought, did he mention the special response team? After a while, the military captured the attacking group and John asked with a displeased look, how could this ever happen? Why didn't their abilities work, and what kind of monsters were they? The captain came up to him, stepped on his head and asked, did he call them monsters? He looked at him with a serious look and said that only he should be called a monster. A military man came up to him and said that they failed to capture their sniper. This guy is quite cunning. The captain looked down with a calm look and said that he was just a scared rat who escaped from the ship. John asked how could this happen? After all, he was chosen by God and is a talented genius. They started to take him away and he continued to ask in a bewildered voice, how did this happen? Ji Yuan walked towards the rapid response team and said that he never let him down. The captain turned to him and asked, did he manage to escape so quickly? Ji Yuan pointed at him and said that he should let me introduce them. This guy is the Black Panther, a member of the special squad of people with abilities. Chang Ting looked at him and thought that it turns out that he is the Black Panther. The mercenary group of the Qi dynasty had amazing combat power. A legendary man who fought side by side with Ji Yuan until the very end. The Black Panther looked at them with a smile and asked if they wanted a cigarette. Qing Yu and Chang Ting both said at the same time that they didn't need one. The Black Panther looked at him with a smile and asked this guy, he knows him, right? Chang Ting said with a smile that it was the first time he saw him. He wondered what kind of monsters Ji Yuan had gathered around him. It seemed like he needed to work on controlling his facial expression. Black Panther put out his cigarette and started to leave, saying that they could talk for now and that he still had someone to deal with. By the way, he liked these two guys, he should remember to assign them to his squad. Ji Yuan said with a smile that Black Panther was indeed a great warrior. Would they like to join them? Chang Ting said with a smile that if the country needed him, he would do his best. However, he still wanted to live freely, so he apologized. Ji Yuan sighed and said that if they changed their minds, they could come to him anytime and that their doors were always open for them. He needed to clean up this mess, so he couldn't see them off. Chang Ting started to leave, waved his hand at him, and bid him farewell. Ji Yuan asked, by the way, the next portal would open in 4 days, right? Chang Ting was about to deny it, but when he thought about it, he turned around and looked at him with a very surprised look. Ji Yuan started to leave, waved his hand at them and said that he hoped that they would meet again in 5 days. After some time on the street, Chang Ting said with a thoughtful look that Ji Yuan was a real monster. Qing Yu called his name and asked if he thought he was similar to him. Chang Ting was surprised that he suggested this and thought that he couldn't be sure that he wasn't the only one so special in this world. What if there were others who were so gifted and knew the future? Qing Yu put his hand on his shoulder and said that they had better think about what to do next. Ji Yuan was definitely aiming for the next portal. What should they do in that case? Chang Ting said with a determined voice that the next portal would definitely belong to them. He thought with a serious look that he wasn't the most special, he was just getting stronger to fight monsters. After some time, Qing Yu stood in the apartment and looked out the window with his ability. He turned around and said that he didn't think they had a chance. Chang Ting sighed with a dissatisfied look and said that he felt disgusting. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door and Rose said that he should open it. It was her, their sister. Qing Yu looked at the door with a worried look and said that he recognized that voice. Chang Ting also looked at the door and calmly agreed and said that it was definitely her. Qing Yu was confused and asked how that woman was able to find them, and what should they do now. Rose continued to knock on the door and said that their sister's patience had already run out. One of their group used an ability, and they were able to pass through the door. The man waved at them with a dissatisfied look and said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Rose pushed him away and loudly said that he should get out of the way. She walked up to the guys with a smile and said that they didn't need to worry, because she came to discuss a deal with them. Changting looked at them with a calm expression and asked, "What kind of deal is she talking about?" The captain stepped forward and said that they must have met the scorpion and that gorilla by now. They should let him introduce himself. His name is the Honey Badger, and he is the captain of the 12-star group. Qingyu started laughing loudly at the way he introduced himself and asked, "Is that really his name?" The gorilla smiled and told the captain that he had told him to change his call sign a long time ago. He should just look at how some guy laughed at him. The Honey Badger asked with a red face. He thought that was pretty good, wasn't it? Changting looked at him with a calm expression and thought that this name was not mentioned in the novel. He is not an important enough character to cause trouble. The Honey Badger calmly said that they should get down to business. A new portal will open at midnight tonight, and he is sure that they know about it. However, the place where it will open is strictly guarded. They set up a base here, so they probably know the current situation. Changting asked calmly, "So they want them to catch the Abyss Seed?" The Honey Badger smiled and snapped his fingers and said that he understood correctly. Changting looked at him seriously and said that he refused the offer. The Honey Badger said that he hadn't even had time to voice the conditions yet. Changting said that there was no need for that. They should also know that this portal was completely controlled. The 5 of them didn't have a single chance. Besides, even if they succeeded, what would happen next? Become the object of hatred of the entire 6th district? Perhaps not only this district, they would become enemies for the entire country. He didn't know what conditions they had to offer to convince him. The Honey Badger said that he had exceeded his expectations and the scorpion really liked him. He had assessed the situation correctly. For him to want to confront the entire country, he really had to offer incredible conditions. The gorilla took out a small bag and asked if this would be enough. He opened the bag and showed them 2 crystals. Qingyu asked with a very surprised and happy look, "Weren't these the Abyss Stones?" Changting calmly looked at the 2 Abyss Stones, and it caught his attention. The Honey Badger said with a smile, "The one on the left is the one that increases strength. Given their abilities, they won't be able to absorb it. And the owner of the stone on the right, he has already contacted." Changting looked at him and asked, "Was it that sniper?" The Honey Badger said with a smile, "That's exactly it. Although they had to put in a lot of effort to kill him, but the result is worth it. It can be said that the compatibility between these 2 stones and them is 100%. Now, will he think about their proposal?" Qingyu asked quietly, "What's with those Abyss Stones? Is it possible that when the owner of an ability dies, their strength returns to the Abyss Stone?" Changting said that it's not always like that. Only a small amount of abilities returns back to the stones. Qingyu asked with a wide smile, "Opportunities and risks go hand in hand, should they agree?" Changting became angry and asked, "Is he tired of living already? Nothing good will happen if he dies." He apologized to them and said that, however, he still refuses. The Honey Badger scratched his head and told the guy that he was not flexible at all. There were 2 abyssal stones here and he didn't care. The gorilla was very surprised by his decision and asked if he was serious about refusing. The Honey Badger threw him a yellow abyssal stone and said that if he didn't want it, he wouldn't insist. It was the sniper's abyssal stone and he could consider it a gift as a sign of their acquaintance. The gorilla turned to the captain and was about to ask him something about what had happened. The Honey Badger looked at him with a very serious expression and said nothing. The gorilla slapped himself in the face and said that he understood everything and was already silent. They all started to leave together, and the Honey Badger said that he hoped that they would have a chance to work together in the future. After some time on the street, the gorilla told the captain that sometimes he couldn't understand him at all. He just gave away such a rare abyssal stone like that. The Honey Badger looked at him with a smile and asked what he thought of their relationship. More specifically, what kind of relationship do they have? Are they friends, comrades, or is it a captain-subordinate relationship, like they have? The gorilla looked at him with a confused look and asked the captain what exactly he meant. The Honey Badger looked at him with a displeased look and said that he probably would even agree to not drink for a whole day just to let the scorpion share her brain with him. He moved on and said that they should go, he would understand everything soon. The gorilla turned around with a displeased look and asked what the captain meant. Rose did not answer this question, and he became even more angry at them. He asked loudly, "Can't they talk directly?" At the same time, Qingyu asked what they meant, and why did they just give them the rare abyss stone. Changting walked up to him and said that even if it was part of their plan, they should accept it. Finding a suitable stone for him is extremely difficult, he must hurry up and swallow it. Qingyu did as he said, and a very strong and bright energy began to emanate from his eye. After that, he said with a happy look that they had hit the jackpot. Originally, the range of his eagle vision was only 2 kilometers, but now it had increased to 3 kilometers, and he also gained a new ability. Developed eagle vision will lock onto a target once, as long as it is within 500 meters, no matter where it is hiding, he will be able to see it clearly. He will be able to see even through cover. Combined with his weapon, the target will definitely be hit, and he is now invincible. Chan Ting looked at him with a smile and said that he had a very powerful second ability. Qingyu said that looking back, he realized that they should have accepted their offer. If he also received such a stone, he could develop even more powerful abilities. Chan Ting looked to the side and thought that his soul could absorb all kinds of abyss stones, but he wouldn't tell him about it for now so as not to disappoint him. Qingyu asked, they wouldn't give up on this portal, right? Should they remind Ji Yuan about it? Chan Ting asked, did he really think that a monster like him needed to be reminded? Qingyu shuddered at being reminded of this. He agreed and said that if they encountered such a monster, they would probably not gain anything. Chan Ting said with a thoughtful look, it would take a long time for the fifth abyss to appear. Most likely it was done on purpose to give people a chance to adapt and get used to it. Qingyu asked, what would they do next? Chan Ting said that when the fifth abyss appeared, they should have enough strength to master it, otherwise, they would become weaker and weaker. Qingyu sighed and asked, however, how could they recruit people for their team? Chan Ting thought that it was unlikely that they would be able to recruit Ji Yuan now, and the scorpion should also be forgotten. Mu Qiu seemed like a good choice, but she had too dangerous a background, and she was also connected to the government. Who else could they quickly recruit? He remembered something and asked loudly, how could he have forgotten about him? Qingyu was very surprised by this and asked, was he sick? Chan Ting happily agreed and said that he had actually forgotten something very important. He thought that this person was only mentioned once in the book, and his name was not even mentioned. However, his ability was very strong, so much so that the person who inherited it later became a member of the 12 Stars. The person who received his ability once said that he got it in the 6th district, in the former F city. He passed by a center for disabled children called Hope more than once. If they could find him and persuade him to join them, it would definitely be a great advantage for them. However, he didn't know if he had any powers now, but that didn't matter. He grabbed his hand and said that they had to go somewhere. Qingyu was surprised by this and asked where he was taking him. After a while, they got off the bus and he asked what they were doing here. Chan Ting said that he wasn't sure, but he hoped it wasn't in vain. A man who was standing at the site turned around and noticed them. He extended his hand to them, greeted them, and asked if he could find out why they had come here. Chan Ting shook his hand and said that they had heard that there was a charity organization here that took care of children and that he wanted to make some donations too, so they had come to take a look. The man was happy about this and said that they should let him introduce himself, that he was Zhu Fei, the director of the charity organization. This is not the place for such talk, so they should go inside. Their attention was caught by a loud male voice calling his name and saying that a month has already passed, so it is time to pay the bills. They turned around and saw a group of men. Zhu Fei was at a loss, apologized and said that they should let him handle this first. He walked up to the man who called him and asked Boss Zhang if he could give him a few more days. His charity will definitely attract investment. The man said with a big smile that he had told him the same thing a month ago. Zhu Fei said with a worried look that he was asking for one more time to believe him. Zhang slapped his hand hard and said loudly that he was not going to believe his nonsense. He owed him 1.5 million with interest, either he had to give him the money or the yard to pay the debt. Zhu Fei looked at him with a displeased look, but eventually calmed down and said that he was asking for one last time to believe him. Zhang said that this beautifully laid out courtyard was such a good location, green hills and a river, it would be great to turn it into a small resort. He should stop this talk and from today on this courtyard belongs to him. He pointed his finger to the side with a smile, and said that they should drive these cripples out of this courtyard. Zhu Fei got very angry about this, and said that this was too much. Qingyu asked what they should do, should they intervene? Chan Ting looked at it calmly, and said that they should wait for now. Zhang looked at the guys who came with him, and said that they should quickly deal with this. Zhu Fei stood in their way and told the boss that they shouldn't go that far, he would definitely pay him. Zhang said with a big smile that he didn't expect him to pay back in the first place, so he would take this place today. He had been annoyed by this bunch of cripples for a long time. They were weird, brought misfortune, and had a negative effect on his feng shui. Zhu Fei looked at him with a displeased look, and told the boss that he shouldn't force him to do this. Zhang smirked at this and asked, was he forcing him, and what could he do to him? Zhu Fei looked at him with a very angry look, and the boss saw a terrifying monster reaching out its hand towards him. Because of this, he lost consciousness and immediately fell silent. A man ran up to him and asked what happened to him. He turned to the others and said that the boss was having a seizure. They needed to quickly take him to the hospital. They all started running away from the territory together, and Qingyu wanted to say something with a confused look. Chang Ting looked at this with a smile and said nothing. After that, they entered the building and Zhu Fei said that he apologized for having to see this. He could offer them some water to drink. Chang Ting asked how long ago he had the ability? Zhu Fei was confused by this, and said that he did not understand what he was talking about. Chang Ting called him by name, and said that the world had changed, and he was sure that he knew it better than anyone else. This world had become a playground for the seeds of the abyss. Soon the structure of the world would be changed, the existing laws and rules would also be revised. He had received a very powerful ability. Perhaps he feels that with such power, he will be able to protect his charity and these children. However, he can tell him for sure that this is impossible. It is obvious that the power of one person is limited. As more and more people protect abilities, the abyss seeds continue to gain strength. He will not be able to protect these children or his charity alone. Zhu Fei could not bear it any longer and asked with a dissatisfied expression, "What is he trying to say and why did they come here?" Chang Ting said with a smile that he should let him formally introduce himself. He gave his name, pointed to the side and said that this was his good friend Qingyu. They came here to ask him to join them. Zhu Fei asked, "Were they sent here by the government?" Chang Ting said that was not the case. They did not belong to any official organization. He could think of them as a small group of mercenaries. Zhu Fei asked, "Does joining them mean frequently encountering dangers and even involving children in it?" Chang Ting looked at him calmly and agreed to this. Zhu Fei looked dissatisfied and said that in that case, he should refuse the offer. Chang Ting said that if he joined them, he would face danger, but he would also gain more resources and protection. Has he ever thought about the time when the law was completely abolished, when ability users would become uncontrollable? What would he have to face then? For example, when he faced Boss Zhang earlier. He could easily deal with him with his ability, but how long could he do this? He has the strength, but couldn't Boss find someone like him to counter him? Zhu Fei was very confused by this and couldn't give him any answer. Chang Ting said with a serious expression that if he really wanted to protect the children, he should join him. He promises that as long as he lives, he will protect them. Zhu Fei looked down with a confused expression and said that he should give him time to think about it. They started to leave the room and Chang Ting said that of course he should take his time and think about it carefully. They walked outside and Qingyu said with a smile that he was good at negotiating. But what kind of ability does Zhu Fei have? Chang Ting turned to him and said that he had one of the most terrifying ones. It was called Nightmare. Nightmare is a special ability that can drag a person into a dream world created by its owner through direct eye contact. As the owner of the ability becomes stronger, the dream world will also evolve. Any damage done in this world will affect the real body, so he should not mess with it unless necessary. Qingyu was very surprised by this and asked, "Isn't this ability invincible?" Chang Ting said that Nightmare can be considered one of the strongest abilities, but it has a huge drawback. The owner of Nightmare must make direct eye contact with the target in order to activate the ability. In addition, if the opponent's mental strength exceeds that of the ability user, it may even cause a backlash. Qingyu said with a thoughtful look, "So this ability is powerful, but it also comes with great risks. If used incorrectly, it can lead to serious unpleasant consequences." Suddenly, he received a phone call. He answered the phone and asked with a happy look, "Did it happen so quickly?" He turned around and said loudly that their secret base had already been prepared. Chang Ting was also happy about this, and said that it happened faster than he expected. Their attention was drawn to Zhu Fei, who came out of the building, and they both turned to him. He said with a calm look that it seemed like he had made a decision. Zhu Fei said with a determined look that he would join them and believed that he was right. The world had changed and he alone could not protect the children, so he decided to trust them. Chang Ting extended his hand to him and said with a smile that he would keep his promise. They shook hands and he said that he officially welcomed him to their ranks. Zhu Fei asked, "By the way, what is the name of their group?" Qingyu said that they have not yet chosen a name. Chang Ting thought about it and asked, "What should they call themselves?" He said with a smile that they can call their group Providence. After some time, Qingyu drove a jeep on a mountain road, while Chang Ting sat next to him. The children who were sitting in the back asked the director, "Are they there yet?" He already wants to eat. There will be toys in the new place, right? Zhu Fei said with a smile that they should be patient for a little longer, they are almost there. After that, the car stopped. He turned around and asked, are they there yet? Qingyu and Chang Ting got out of the car and looked at their secret base. He looked at it with a very happy look and said that he was shocked by this base. The children ran forward, laughing joyfully and saying that it was so beautiful here. Zhu Fei shouted to get their attention and said that they should slow down and not run. A man came out to them, looking worried and about to say something. Qingyu gave his thumbs up with a happy smile and told his uncle that he had done a great job. However, he must remember that he must keep this a secret. After all, the captain is not a very good person. By the way, why is he sweating so much? He is getting old, he needs to take care of himself. After all, he looks very tired. The uncle looked around with a confused look and his body was shaking, and Chang Ting noticed this and it attracted his attention. He said very loudly that they should all stop where they were. The children were scared because of this and Zhu Fei asked worriedly, what happened? Qingyu turned around and asked, what's the matter? Chang Ting looked at the man with a serious look and asked, is there anything he wants to say? Uncle stood up and said loudly that he was forced. It was not his fault, she found this place herself. Immediately after that, Chang Ting and Qingyu immediately took out their weapons and looked forward with serious expressions. The door to the building opened and they waited with worried looks for the man to show his face. Mu Chio walked out of the house with a happy smile and asked, are they surprised by this? She walked up to them and said that as she thought, he needed money to set up his own mercenary group. The location of their base was not bad, it took her a lot of effort to find it. Chang Ting said that she should not do this anymore. One day she will scare someone to death. Mu Chio asked with a dissatisfied look, is he going to set up his own mercenary group and is still afraid of others? Qingyu said with a dissatisfied look that he almost shot her. Mu Chio pointed to the side with a smile and asked, is this the new member of their team? He walked up to them and Chang Ting said with a smile that she should let him introduce him, this is Zhu Fei. He also told him her name, and Mu Chio said with a smile that it was not bad, their group now had 4 people. Chang Ting was surprised by this and was about to ask something, but she took his hand and said that it was time for them to go inside. Qingyu asked with a confused and uncomprehending look what was going on here. Chang Ting turned to him and said that he himself did not know. They all entered the building and Zhu Fei told the children that they should stop and calm down. Mu Chio turned around with a smile and said that they should follow her, she would show them the conference room. They entered the room and Qingyu asked in surprise, was it his uncle who did all this? Mu Chio asked, what was he even talking about? She was the one who arranged this, he would have to pay her back later. Chang Ting turned to her and asked, what was all this? Mu Chio walked to the big screen and said that she was thinking about something. Following the family rules is not fun at all, and they are also too strict. So she decided to join them. They don't have to worry, from now on all the expenses and weapons will be on her account, she will pay for everything.